Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to what I think is our seventh day of evidence hearings. Those who have mobile electronic devices may use them to transmit silently into the outside world what they hear this afternoon in the hearing room, but only after 10 minutes have elapsed so as to fit in with the live stream. The devices may not be used for recording proceedings or taking photographs. Thank you. Could the witness be sworn, please? Thank you.
Okay.
Just repeat after me. I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
I do solemnly, sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
the
whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Mr. Lowe, please sit down. Please sit down.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Lowe, please can you give the inquiry your full name?
Martyn Anthony Lowe.
Mr. Lowe, you've provided to the inquiry a witness statement that is dated the 14th of December 2023. It's 41 pages long. Could we please have it up on screen? It's UCPI 36683. It's A1 in the hard copy.
Speak up a bit.
Of course. I'll begin again.
Yeah, or nearer the microphone.
You've provided a witness statement to the inquiry, 41 pages, dated the 14th of December 2023. Is that right?
That is correct.
Could we have it on screen, please? It's UCPI 36683. Can you see that on the screen in front of you?
Yes.
Could we please turn to page 41, the signature page? The signature is covered by a redaction, but do you recall signing this document?
I do.
Can you confirm that it is true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
It is.
Thank you, that can come down. Mr. Lowe, I understand that your early activism, if I can put it like that, was centred around pacifism. Is that right?
That is correct.
You were active in the Peace Pledge Union, which I understand from your witness statement to be the British section of the War Resisters International.
That's correct.
Could you give a very brief overview of the War Resisters International and explain where PPU, the Peace Pledge Union, fits in?
The War Resisters International, WRI, is the pacifist international, which has sections in various countries of the world, the Peace Pledge Union being the British section. But its purpose is to promote pacifism and also to help and promote conscientious objection. It's got a special status with the United Nations as a consultative organisation on conscientious objection, but primarily it is to work for a pacifist world.
Thank you. In your witness statement, you discuss the notion of non-violence, a single non-hyphenated word. Could you help us with what you mean by non-violence?
There is non-violence is two words, so that's without violence. Non-violence is a philosophy of a pacifist philosophy of not hurting or causing to be hurt or killed or damaged any individual.
How has that notion influenced your involvement in groups or campaigns?
It's central to my way of thinking. I wouldn't join a group that hadn't any group that would advocate violence, I would not wish to join.
You've been involved in many groups, I think, over the years. The questions I'm going to ask are going to focus on your involvement with one group in particular, that's London Greenpeace. The reason for the focus is that London Greenpeace was infiltrated by undercover officers from the Special Demonstration Squad, most specifically, in your case, by HN10, who you knew, I think, as Bob Robinson, and who I'll call Bob Lambert.
Yes.
Firstly, before we get into the infiltration by the SDS, I'd like to ask you about the origins of London Greenpeace. I understand that it was founded in the early 1970s by Peace News and War Resisters International activists. Is that right?
That is correct.
Were you involved in the group who formed London Greenpeace?
No, I was involved with Peace News. Well, I helped with Peace News, but I wasn't. The first time I became actively involved, that did anything with the group, was when the group was about to have the London to Paris march, and that was 1973.
And is that 1 or 2 years after London Greenpeace?
That was
had been
about
founded?
2 years after it started.
The circumstances in which it came to be founded, the people who founded it, what does that tell us about London Greenpeace?
Well, the idea was, still is, I think, to show the connection between ecology and the military, and to combine campaigning on the two.
Thank you. I'm now going to ask you questions about your early involvement in London Greenpeace, roughly up until 1984. At a general level, whilst you were part of the group, what was the structure or absence of structure of London Greenpeace?
It was a very loose group, in as much as different people took on different roles, but it didn't have to my knowledge, any structure of hierarchy. There was a bank account, and decisions were made at meetings.
And so, when we're dealing with London Greenpeace's involvement in something, or the support of London Greenpeace for something else, is it really possible to speak of London Greenpeace as speaking with one voice, or were there many voices?
I think it's better to say that between us, those who were involved in the group, we had a series of aims, and we would work in consultation with each other, with practical decision making being done at the meetings, at the weekly meetings.
If we were to look at London Greenpeace's stance on certain issues, is it possible, in respect of perhaps broad issues such as pacifism, to say that London Greenpeace spoke with one voice in relation to that issue?
Can you repeat that, please?
Of course. London Greenpeace was a group comprised of many people. On some issues, did all people agree?
Initially, the focus was, apart from the general aims, it was to stop the bomb test taking place at Moroa, and everything was focused that way. It was only later on that we started looking at bomb tests elsewhere, because the very early people in the group, a lot of them were Australasians, so it was local to them.
I want to ask you about the activities of London Greenpeace and its members. Were there public meetings that were held by London Greenpeace?
I don't remember any public meetings. I do remember marches and demonstrations. For instance, a die-in outside the French embassy.
When the group would come together to meet, who would be invited to those meetings?
I don't think we ever invited anyone. People turned up who were interested in taking part in the work.
The work you've mentioned would involve organising demonstrations. Are there any other organised activities that London Greenpeace would be involved in?
I can't remember any at that stage, apart from maybe distributing the Greenpeace broadsheet, which was published initially in Peace News.
I'd like to come now to the issue of disorder. There's much made in this inquiry of the notion of public disorder. Does that notion have a meaning to you?
Nobody was actually aiming to do any public disorder. The purpose of demonstrations, the purpose of campaigning, is to get one's ideas over and persuade people that we need change. I mean, if you land up in a situation where there is disorder, it's usually people from outside, or there's a bit of legislation you weren't aware of, but you walk away.
And so, do I understand your evidence to be that, as far as you were concerned, it was not the aim of those in London Greenpeace to create disorder?
Precisely, it was never on the agenda.
However, might it have occurred at demonstrations organised by London Greenpeace members?
I can't remember any that caused problems. In fact, when we had some of the demonstrations, we coordinated, well, I can remember one in 1974, where we went and talked to the police about the route we were going to use. You know, it's straightforward that way.
The period that we're talking about now, in your mind, are your answers applicable to the entirety of your involvement in London Greenpeace?
I think you would need to ask that question in a different way.
We'll come to some specific examples later on. For now, I think in your witness statement, you discuss the Tranche anti-nuclear allowance. Could we please have the witness statement back on the screen? It's UCPI 36683. And I'd like to turn to page 15, paragraph 56, please. Thank you. Ms. Lowe, I'm just going to read this out so that we're all talking about the same thing,
yes,
and then ask some questions arising from it. You say, I do, however, recall that during the course of 1979, there was a long debate between different groups about different kinds of direct action and whether destruction of property was a violent act. This discussion mainly took place within the Tranche Alliance, of which London Greenpeace was a part, and so involved in those discussions. I was of the attitude that it was not a violent act to get rid of equipment that was being used for destructive purposes. We had an agreement between all the groups not to do anything like that.
Yes.
Firstly, can you explain what the Tranche Anti-Nuclear Alliance was?
Right. At that stage, they were building the first reactor in Britain for a couple of decades. It was a greenfield site, and what was happening was that we organised demonstrations at the site as part of a overall campaign with other groups and organisations to try and stop it happening. The occupation of Tranche, there had been lots and lots of discussions about how it should proceed. nothing was ever said about taking action or trying to destroy any equipment at the time, and that was quite clearly understood by everybody who'd been involved up to that stage.
Thank you. And in your witness statement here, you say, I was of the attitude that it was not a violent act to get rid of equipment that was being used for destructive purposes. Does that mean that you would or may have supported the damaging or destruction of property at Torness?
There is some equipment that you do not want to try and destroy, because trying to destroy it would actually cause more harm than good. For instance, people talk about slashing tyres. Don't do it, because the pressure inside would hurt yourself. You've got a lot of people who take this romantic idea almost of their own that destroying property is something that can be done. It's not as simple as people think it is. There is a symbolism with the broken rifle, the symbol of War Resisters International, of the broken rifle, breaking it. But try and break a rifle, it's not as straightforward as people think it is.
Regardless, though, of the utility or sense in damaging property, do I understand it that you don't have a moral objection to the destruction of property in certain circumstances?
I have a moral objection or ideological objection to hurting people and our fellow creatures. Some property should never be produced in the first place. So destroying it, I've got no problem with. The question is how it's done, and I've not actually been involved in that kind of thing. It's not as simple as people think it is.
And if that entails breaking the law or committing a criminal offence, is your attitude so be it?
Can you repeat?
If in damaging the property or destroying it, that amounts to the criminal offence of criminal damage, what's your attitude to that?
I don't think anyone who talks about this thinks in terms of criminal damage. They talk about what is done to immobilise the equipment or item so that it's unusable. They just don't think, oh, that's criminal, that's not criminal. It's a question of how we can stop it being used. But it was never something I was personally involved in doing.
Could I ask you about a different topic now, and that's the method of producing publications at London Greenpeace? We'll go to an example that you yourself have provided. It's UCPI 36667. It's at A5 of the hard copy bundle, sir. It's a report that was submitted to the WRI Triennial Conference, and it'll be on the screen in just a moment.
Okay.
Do you recognise the leaflet?
Oh, I know that one well.
Great. Can you describe the process, in terms of collaboration or otherwise, by which this leaflet was produced?
Which para, or is it just...
The entire publication.
Oh, right, yeah.
How did it come to be produced?
I think that does sum up what we were doing. Most protest, you turn up and it's symbolic. It really is symbolic, because you're never going to get inside the gates or inside the other side of the fence. What you're looking for is to persuade people that the place you're demonstrating outside should not exist. And, you know, you would hope people working there would decide not to continue working there. But a lot of it is persuasion about ideas and changing the society we live in.
This leaflet, do you know who wrote it?
It was produced over the years, so there's different versions of it. I know one version Albert did, but that was tweaking it. But it'd been in existence since the group had started, but just added other examples later on.
And so, in general, for the production of publications by London Greenpeace, was it a collaborative process?
Very much so. One of us would go away and produce a draft, and then we would talk about how it needed revising, grammar, spelling, etc. But you know, it was never one person.
What about the contribution of competing ideas into a draft? How would it come to be that a central message in a publication was agreed upon?
Discussion. I mean, we'd go through, over a period of time, some of us would get together, we'd look at what was being written, we would discuss what was being written, but it would go to the group meeting to finalise what was being done. Except sometimes there would be a leaflet produced last moment, but there was a general agreement in the first place of what should be in it.
I'm going to ask you now, in brief, about Bob Lambert. We'll come back to deal with him in more detail later on. I want to transport you to the summer of 1984 at London Greenpeace. Is that how you came to meet Bob Lambert?
First time, yes, at one of the group meetings. I had never heard of him before. Just turned up.
In your early dealings with him, what was your impression of him?
Same impression that I have still. Very intelligent bloke and very amiable. I think that's what fooled most of us, thinking that he was okay. But highly, highly intelligent, very amiable.
From the summer of 1984, and for context, Bob Lambert's deployment began around the 18th of June 1984. So if we take June 1984 to December 1984, what was the nature of your relationship with him?
Very friendly. Because we used to go to the pub afterwards and drink together, and yeah, it was just very friendly there. But at that period, that was the main thing with him.
When you say you used to go to the pub afterwards, is this after was there
the
a
meeting.
weekly?
After the meeting.
Was there a regularity to the meetings?
Yes.
Was it every Thursday?
It was every week that we'd have the meeting, then whole groups of us would go to the pub together and chat over various bits and pieces that was going on. But it was just, the socialising bit as opposed to the political bit in the meeting.
In those early months, what was Bob Lambert's influence within London Greenpeace?
This I've thought about a lot in retrospect. He did mention, I can't remember things he mentioned, but all the time I knew him, he kept trying to persuade me to get involved with the Hunt Saboteurs Association. which I wasn't interested in. And he also, one of the first things he did was to organise bring up and organise a picket demonstration at the AGM of Unigate.
We'll come to that specific example. How would he get involved in the group's activities?
I think the same as everyone else. Turn up, take part in the meeting, and if we had an event or a demonstration, just go to them. I can't remember any specific ones he was at. I wouldn't even try.
We're all familiar with being in group settings, and different people take on different roles within groups, be they formal or informal.
Yes.
What kind of role did Bob Lambert take on within London Greenpeace?
I remember him bringing up issues. I don't remember him taking on any formal tasks. He may have, but I don't remember.
Were there formal tasks to be taken on at London Greenpeace?
Oh, dealing with finance, dealing with general inquiries. But by the time Bob turned up, we had form letters and leaflets on different subjects. So it was just a matter of putting an information pack together.
Thinking back to the summer of 1984, can you remember how old Bob Lambert was in relation to others who attended Greenpeace meetings?
In terms of the scale, I think, well, Bob's about the same age as me. So that was easy. There were some younger people, but the majority of the people I was working with were late 20s, early 30s. It was only later that changed.
I'm going to move now to ask you some questions about the direction of London Greenpeace over the years. I'm going to deal firstly with the period before Bob Lambert arrived at London Greenpeace, and then secondly we'll move on to deal with the period after he arrived. Just to bookend this, I think you left London Greenpeace around October or the winter of 1985.
I think it was September. It's at this stage, it was I was pulling out, and one of the things I did was to write up an office manual.
Mr. Lowe, one view of the documents that have been produced to this inquiry is that the focus of London Greenpeace over time shifted towards being increasingly focused on animal rights issues. Broadly, do you agree with that view or not?
It changed. It really changed. The very beginning was anti-nuclear and non-violence.
And what did it change to?
Well, there was one occasion when there was a derailment at Stratford of a nuclear waste flask, which I dealt with downstairs in the telephone and did some press work. And when I came up, the people that were turned up, which had been influenced by Bob, they weren't interested. All they wanted to know was about the animal issues. I wasn't interested, and that's the point at which I really started thinking, why am I here?
On the topic of animal rights, was there anything objectionable in principle to animal rights being an issue of concern at London Greenpeace?
In principle, no, but it was not the group's focus. It was not what the group had been set up to do. Although I will also say that a certain proportion of the group were vegetarian or were vegan in some cases. So there's a real sympathy towards that kind of thing.
We've heard you discuss the anti-nuclear side of London Greenpeace, and earlier in your evidence you mentioned ecology concerns. Do concerns for animal rights and concerns for ecology overlap with one another?
Yes, because we produced a poster, nuclear power, nuclear weapons kill animals too. It was just making the point that it wasn't just human beings that would hurt. And we looked at the kind of damage that radiation did to animals, but it was not a major focus on what we were doing. It was one of a number of issues we were looking at.
I want to ask you now about your connection with Ronnie Lee. Ronnie Lee is credited by some with having established the Animal Liberation Front, or having coined the notion, and as having been its press officer in the late 1970s. In 1987, he received a term of imprisonment of around 10 years for criminal activity related to animal rights. Firstly, we'll come on to deal with the thornier questions, but firstly, how did you know him?
Ronnie turned up and was part of the group around. I remember meeting him he was at meetings in 1974. I'd met him before that in terms of some peace movement activities.
In the early 1980s, so in the period leading up to 1984, what was his involvement with London Greenpeace?
Ronnie I remember turning up at meetings, but he wasn't a major, activist. A lot of people just turned up at meetings and went along to events, but they weren't doing organising work.
So would it be fair to say that he did not directly influence the direction of London Greenpeace? What about indirectly, perhaps as a source of inspiration?
Only in as much as he... the one thing he did tell me, and which I've picked up on, was VegFam, which was a vegan organisation supplying trees to grow for food in developing countries. And it was that kind of practical project that I learned from him. He wasn't doing the head-on campaigning which the LF was doing at that stage. In fact, when we learnt about him being arrested, we were somewhat taken aback.
I'd like to ask you now about a passage of your witness statement, which I'll have brought up on screen.
Sorry?
I'm going to ask you about your witness statement. It's going to come
Yes.
up on screen. It's page 14, paragraph 54, please. The reference is 36683. It begins on page 14 and it goes over onto page 15. Again, I'm going to read paragraph 54 and then ask you some questions about it. It says this.
Yeah.
There was no alignment between individuals who were active members of London Greenpeace and those who were active in the ALF, apart from the odd individual. When campaigners who were supportive of the ALF turned up to London Greenpeace meetings, the complexion of London Greenpeace really changed. I cannot put a name or a face to people who took these views, as those attending never expressly said they would have supported the ALF or animal rights militia. The issue of animal rights direct action was never discussed or brought up at the meetings. By the meetings, are you referring to the same thing you've been referring to all along? London Greenpeace has a meeting and anybody can attend.
It was never brought up at a Greenpeace London meeting as an issue. The first person who brought up anything to do with that was Bob.
Thank you, that can come down. Was it discussed as a topic of conversation at all, support for the Animal Liberation Front?
I cannot remember that happening, except in as much as Ronnie had been part of the group and Ronnie was one of the Brimic 14. And I, at one stage, had shared a flat with one of the 14, a New Alba. So, of course, it would have been talked about, but it wasn't a specific Greenpeace issue.
There's a document you've provided to the inquiry. We've also been provided it by another witness, Paul Gravett. It's slightly easier to read in the format he's provided it, so I'm going to ask for his version to go up onto the screen. It's UCPI 37233. So it's at the back of your bundle A for Martyn Lowe. Do you recognise this leaflet?
I remember this one well, yes.
Can you recall who produced it?
I drafted it. And there were different versions.
So through the questions I'm going to ask you now, we're going to see over the page, but not just yet, that this one is dated April 1980. And there's a later updated version, July 1984, just so you know the direction of travel. You produced this. Was there collaboration in the way it was produced, like with all Greenpeace documents, or was this different?
At that stage, if I was working on a document, I would work on it with one or two other people. Certainly, I could name an individual who was involved in the group, but not at that stage, who every time we sent letters out would check the letters, would check anything, that there was no spelling mistakes, grammar, whatever. And we would talk about that kind of thing as well. But it was understood, I think, amongst us what our line was.
Before distributing a leaflet such as this, would you run it past others in the group to check they were comfortable with it being published in the name of Greenpeace?
Even if it was hadn't gone to a group meeting, it would have been gone through with a number of activists who were involved at the time. But at that point, we were still a very small group, so that was very easy to do.
Do you recall any specific objection to this publication?
No.
There was none, or you can't recall whether there was any?
No. I think people were just happy with it, do it. It was produced because of the problems of confusion that was being caused for us.
And those problems and confusion as we now go through the document, do you mean in relation to being able to distinguish London Greenpeace with Greenpeace International?
Greenpeace International, Greenpeace Foundation, they had the whole range that they went by.
On page 1 of this leaflet, you describe the difference between the two. And on page 2, if we can go over, please. At the top, I'm going to ask for the up until the end of the word ecologist philosophy be highlighted, please.
Mm-hmm.
To the end of the next paragraph, please. There, thank you. I'm going to read this now and ask you some questions, same as before.
Yes.
Issues related to the question of animal liberation, such as vegetarianism, population, land use, agriculture, and this obviously follows on from the previous page. Below is listed some of the groups and organisations that are working within this area. Compassion in World Farming, Beauty Without Cruelty, the Vegetarian Society, the Vegan Society. A number of people involved in this group are vegetarian and see vegetarianism as part of their political/non-violent/ecologist philosophy. This document is signposting people to groups who are concerned with animal rights issues. Is that a fair summary?
I think that well, actually, at that stage, we never talked about animal rights. We talked, animal liberation had a kind of different meaning, I think. It was still developing as a philosophy for people. Very difficult at this stage to say, yes, that was, definitively what we were thinking. But it was very much tied up with an extension of vegetarian ideas and way of life. The thing I should say is that when I got involved in the peace movement, a very high percentage of pacifists were vegetarian. It just went hand in hand.
Could we zoom out from this, please, and pick up from the next sentence, 2 magazines, to the bottom of the paragraph after? Thank you. That's perfect. 2 magazines which cover the animal liberationist struggle are The Beast and Howl. Details of how to obtain them. Howl is a publication produced by the Hunt Saboteurs Association. Then the document says this: the one group with which we can express political agreement is the Animal Liberation Front. Ronnie Lee, one of the people who has been jailed for his animal liberation activities, is an ex-group activist. Ronnie was first arrested in 1974 for his animal liberation activities, which have included attempts to save seals from slaughter. As the ALF is organised in such a way that is consistent with our own style of working, and because we agree with much of their work, we are including their leaflet as an appendix. The question is this: with in mind that this had been written in April 1980, what does it tell us about the connection between London Greenpeace and the Animal Liberation Front at this time?
The thing with the ALF in the early days, it had a non-violent ethos to it in many ways. Before they went into a vivisection laboratory, or for instance, they would check there was no people there was no animals that was going to get damaged, etc. It was purely the property. Making sure that it was safe from hurting anyone. In fact, at one stage, I was told that Ronnie, with his ideas of non-violence, was actually anti-abortion. They went along with him at that stage. I don't know what his thinking is now, but that is what I gathered at the time.
This document suggests there is something of an alignment between the aims of London Greenpeace and the Animal Liberation Front.
No.
Is that an accurate summary or not?
No, it was just, here's some background information on the issue rather than a political statement by the group.
The leaflet for the ALF is said to be appended to the document.
Yes.
Paul Gravett has provided the leaflet, which is on page 3 of this document, please. Do you recognise this?
I recognise that. And I will also point out that the address on it was the address for Peace News. And when things changed, Peace News said we're no longer going to allow you to use our office. And what I like about this one is that it refers to Reverence for Life.
Just pausing there, when you say when things changed, what are you referring to?
The influence of the animal rights militia.
Could we please zoom in on aims and methods? I'm going to read it again. Our long-term aim is simply to end totally the exploitation of animals by human beings. In the short term, we hope to save as many animals as possible from suffering. Under methods, our methods are direct action. This usually takes 2 forms, which are often combined in one action. Firstly, rescuing animals from establishments where they are being or will be subjected to suffering. These animals are either released into the wild, if it is thought that they will stand a reasonable chance of survival, or found good homes. Secondly, destroying or damaging property used in the process of causing suffering to animals. This leaflet, circulated by London Greenpeace, encourages others to take direct action, doesn't it?
We were doing it as part of a range of other leaflets we were putting out. It should not be seen in isolation. But, I can't see, right, the aims, I can't see that as being a problem. And when it says direct action, there's so many different forms of direct action that there would have to be much more specific. The last part of it, destroying or damaging property used in the process of causing suffering to animals, well, it's the same if you found an animal trap in the countryside, making sure that it didn't spring and hurt an animal. That's and making sure that if you could, removing the mechanism so it couldn't be used again. It's exactly the same kind of idea, I think.
We will come to explore the impact operationally of Bob Lambert's deployment into London Greenpeace. But in this document circulated as of April 1980, does it indicate that the association between London Greenpeace and the Animal Liberation Front goes back before his deployment?
If I recall rightly, we wanted to have a range of leaflets looking at animal issues, and that was one of them, but we didn't have any working relationship with them at the time. And if we had, I wouldn't have been interested.
Thank you. I foreshadowed the issue we're going to talk about now a few times. Now we're going to talk about Bob Lambert's deployment into London Greenpeace and the impact operationally it had on the group. There is some context that I'd like to begin with, and this begins in a document that you were directed to in the days before today, I think last week. It's an intelligence report written by HN11, who is Mike Chitty. He was somebody deployed into the animal rights field, primarily in South London, before Bob Lambert's deployment. The document is UCPI 20790. So again, it's on its own at the back of section A, I think, of the hard copy bundle. It's UCPI 20790. Could we focus in on paragraph 3, please, and the first line of paragraph 4 altogether? Thank you. To give you context, Mr. Lowe, this is an intelligence report written by Mike Chitty on the 9th of April 1984. In it, he is reviewing the animal rights movement in general in London. I'm going to ask you whether you agree with the picture being painted of the animal rights movement in London in April 1984, but I'm going to read it first and then ask you to comment, okay? The last 2 years have seen a dramatic increase in activity by the growing number of animal rights activists throughout Britain, i.e. the recent formation of numerous small local groups, usually aligned with one or more of the major anti-vivisection societies. The regular media coverage and the lavish funding of organisations such as the International Fund for Animal Welfare are indications of increased public concern for the plight of animals used for research, food, clothing, sport and entertainment. Paragraph 4, political complexion and campaigning activities. Support for the movement is drawn from all levels of society, and virtually every political persuasion is represented in this amorphous group. Firstly, do you feel able to comment on the accuracy of this?
At that stage, I was not aware of most of these groups. I just picked it up, odd things in magazines of different sorts. It was not an issue that most of the group were, at that stage, were concerning themselves with. We'd had the work on nuclear power, nuclear weapons and nuclear power. Then we had all the work we were doing about the Falkland War and trying to stop that. There was a lot of pacifist input. This would have been a minor aside.
And just to be clear, this is not reviewing London Greenpeace. It's purporting to review the movement in general. Thinking back to the time, are you able to comment on whether this is an accurate depiction of the movement in general? I
cannot say.
Okay.
It just wasn't focused on it.
Could we turn to page 2, paragraph 7, please? It's page 2, turning on to page 3. This purports to summarise the view on direct action or civil disobedience of animal rights activists. It says this: support for activities which involve the commission of criminal offences, be they minor public order offences or the more serious offences against the Theft Act and Criminal Damage Act, is in the main confined to the younger anarchist members of the movement, most of whom will be unemployed and prepared to spend some time in police cells. You described earlier yourself and Bob Lambert being on the older side, I think, of London Greenpeace. Is it possible that it was the age of those becoming to be involved on the younger side that drove the interest in animal rights?
That and the fact that I think Bob was encouraging them to turn up through going to other groups.
Thank you, we can take that down. I'd like to ask you now about your understanding of Bob Lambert's involvement in issues related to the Richmond Park debacle. It's something you deal with in your statement. At page 35, paragraph 134, please. It's UCPI 36683. Page 35, paragraph 134. Thank you. you say this: "It was Bob who reported about an action to stop the Richmond Park deer cull. This was not an action which anyone in the group had already been involved in. At the time, I wondered whether there was more to Bob's interest in this campaign, which we were not being told about. I remembered he mentioned something about the gates of the park, and now I think that he had already, before bringing the campaign to Greenpeace, taken part in an action to stop the cull going ahead by locking the gates of the park." Do you mean by this that you understood he had been involved in this action before ever turning up to London Greenpeace, i.e. prior to the summer of 1984?
I remember very clearly sitting at the table in the meeting room at 6 Ensley Street. Bob was there. He brought up the subject of the gates. He reported what had happened in terms of locking it. And what went through my mind was, he knows more about this than he's saying. That is the last I can recall of it, up until the later stage when he sent me a letter asking if there had been any local press coverage about it. And that was it. But it just seemed to me that he was telling only part of what he knew.
It's my understanding that the cull in the 1980s would take place roughly in the summer of each year. Do you recall which year you had this conversation with Bob Lambert?
That was 84.
That would be right at the start of your association with him.
The summer of 80, I think it was during 84. I cannot actually be clear. I remember the conversation. I can't be clear on an exact date. But it was a summer, definitely.
Is it possible or not that it was 1985?
It might be. But as I say, I was just not, focusing that much. It was just something he mentioned. And I would just, as I say, think there must be more to this. And it was only later on when I got that letter, when he was asking, that I realised that there's something else there.
You spoke about Unigate earlier on, and we're going to deal with that now. The Unigate demonstration.
Yes.
You, in your witness statement, say that Bob Lambert organised a demonstration against the Unigate annual general meeting in September of 1984. Unigate, a large, perhaps multinational company at the time. Please could we turn to UCPI 36678. It's at A15 of the hard copy bundle. It's an exhibit you produced to the inquiry, Mr. Lowe. This is a leaflet advertising a demonstration that is going to take place on the 6th of September outside the Unigate annual general meeting. Is that right?
Yes.
Can you recall who wrote this leaflet?
That is Bob's handwriting. There's no doubt about that. That is in his handwriting. I think that speaks for itself. And I've seen other documents and the letters I received, the same handwriting is there.
And it says, "Meat is murder. Let the shareholders know what we think. Organised by London Greenpeace." Could we have a different document this time, please? UCPI 20434. So it's an intelligence report at B3 of the hard copy bundle. Mr. Lowe, this is going to come up on the screen. It's an intelligence report submitted by Bob Lambert on the 31st of August 1984. Please could we focus on paragraphs 2 through to 4. It states the date and time of the demonstration. It says at paragraph 3, it's based on the fact that Unigate Limited is concerned in the manufacture of animal foodstuffs on a large scale. Paragraph 4, Martyn Lowe, long-time member of London Greenpeace, is trying to arrange support and publicity for the demonstration. He is confident that many members of the animal rights movement will join the picket, along with several young squatters concerned in the Stop the City protests. Were you trying to arrange support and publicity?
No. I was at the stage concerned with other issues. It was, as I say, Bob was the one who was dealing with. The only other person who did publish it or did some stuff on it was Albert, who phoned up the press office at Unigate.
Albert Beale,
Who phoned the press office at Unigate asking if he could get a press ticket because he wanted to find out more about it. It was a way of doing it. And at the last question, he said, has there been any demonstrations before on your AGMs? And they said, no. Why? Oh, just wondering. He phoned up a little while later to ask about, some ticketing arrangement, by which stage they'd panicked, But that was the sum of the publicity. What went out, which just went out by various contacts or might have been mentioned in, some of the political listings. But it wasn't something I was, concerned with doing the PR with.
was any one person driving the demonstration?
No. I think it all came down to Bob just doing that. And I think if he produced that leaflet, he would have passed it on elsewhere.
Please could we have UCPI 37381 on the screen? So again, I think it's at the back of your bundle A. This is a leaflet that was handed out at the demonstration. A leaflet that was handed out at the demonstration will come on screen shortly. This is a document which was handed out at the demonstration.
Yes.
Does that accord with your recollection?
I remember the leaflet. And again, this is Bob's handwriting. And I do not know how he researched it.
Just to square the point on the handwriting, could we also have UCPI 36674, which is a letter from Bob Lambert to you? This is a letter we'll come back to deal with later on.
Yeah.
But is this one of the documents that you're relying on
yes.
to say what Bob Lambert's handwriting was?
Yes. And I've had that confirmed by someone else who knew him.
We can take that down now, thank you. Both of the leaflets use the slogan, "Meat is murder." So this demonstration had something of an animal rights focus. Is that correct?
I presume so. It was just something that the group always had a wide range of issues it was dealing with, and this was just one of them.
And a demonstration such as this against a large corporate entity
Would it be multinational? I can't remember whether it was national. Don't ask me.
In any event, a protest against a company such as this
Yes.
by London Greenpeace, would it be single issue or multifaceted?
On that one, I think it would be single issue.
Could we have UCPI 20189 on the screen, please? So it's at B4.
Oh, I should also point out the wording "meat is murder" was something that was around at the time. And there was the LP with the Smiths with that name as well. So it wasn't something that was just plucked out the air.
We have an intelligence report here dated the 11th of September 1984. Could we zoom in on paragraphs 2 and 3, please? It's an intelligence report which reports back to the SDS what happened at this demonstration. It says that there were 9 protesters leafleting Unigate Limited shareholders, that the broad grounds of the complaint are set out in the leaflet, which we've just looked at. There was no disorder or untoward incident. Do you agree with that?
Yes, that sounds about right.
Could we please turn to page 2 now and focus on Martyn Lowe, please, and the text to the right of it. Mr. Lowe, this is a list of those who attended the demonstration.
Right.
Your name appears there,
Yes.
your association with London Greenpeace, and it describes you as organiser of the picket. Is that accurate?
I turned up, but I didn't organise it.
Who did?
No.
Who did organise it?
I think it was Bob. Well, hold on a second.
Being careful not to mention any other names.
The thing with the Stop the City, I was at meetings where it was discussed, but I wasn't involved in it.
Okay. I'm going to move on and ask you about a different intelligence report now. It's UCPI 20220. It's at B5, sir. Please could we focus on paragraphs 2 and 3? Mr. Lowe, this is dated the 18th of September 1984, so shortly after the Unigate demonstration. And it says that London Greenpeace members and associates will demonstrate outside Claridge's Hotel, where a major fur fashion show is to be held. Martyn Lowe, organising the protest, believes that there will be 2 shows held during the day. He plans to ask demonstrators to assemble outside and maintain a vigil until the end of the evening show. Do you recall whether you organised this protest?
I didn't organise it. I can't remember any meeting about it. I wasn't on it. I think that's clear.
If you don't recall it, does it follow that you can't tell us who did organise it?
I don't know who was on it. As I say, I was not involved in that particular event. And in fact, I'd have to go back on what day of the week that was, but during that period, I was working on every Wednesday from 9 a.m. until 8 p.m, so it would have been difficult for me to be there.
Please could we turn to UCPI 20230. It's at B6, sir. Please could we focus in on paragraph 3 to begin with? Mr. Lowe, this report is about London Greenpeace's regular weekly meetings. It's dated the 25th of September 1984. It says at the top, as usual, the meeting covered a wide range of subjects within the areas of ecology, peace, animal rights, libertarian and anarchist politics. Just pausing there, is this important context to the range of issues discussed at London Greenpeace?
Yeah, I could add other issues as well. We did a protest, for instance, on land rights, on uranium mining, on the building of hydroelectric dams. It was a very wide range of issues that we campaigned and talked about.
And so if those of us reading the documents published by the inquiry see repeatedly animal rights reported on within London Greenpeace meetings, would you encourage us to remember this context when we're reading them?
I can't remember that specifically, but at the earlier days, it was not something I was concerned about. So,
thank you. Could we turn to paragraph 4, please? This is about Stop the City and Dave Morris. I'm going to read from the top until about halfway down, and then I'll ask you some questions. In relation to Stop the City, it says, Dave Morris asked everyone present to make a special effort to circulate leaflets for the demonstration on the 27th of September. He added that he was confident that it would be the biggest and best Stop the City so far, announced there would be a defendants meeting for those arrested. 3 new leaflets were circulated amongst the group. An argument then ensued between Morris and Martyn Lowe. Morris wanted the next London Greenpeace meeting to be devoted in its entirety to the outstanding affairs of those people involved in the legal and backup services to stop the city, whilst Martyn Lowe wanted the meeting to proceed as normal. The latter, that's you, was concerned that the Peace Pledge Union, the landlords at 6 Ensley Street, where Greenpeace held their meetings, could be embarrassed by a close association with a potentially violent demonstration. First question, would you look out for the concerns of the Peace Pledge Union at London Greenpeace meetings?
if something had gone wrong, it would have perhaps it caused other problems in terms of image, but I can't remember saying anything in those terms.
Did you see Stop the City as being a potentially violent demonstration?
No. The original idea of Stop the City was to move on from demonstrations in the countryside at military bases and take it where the responsibility for the military started, and that was the arms company, etc.
Thank you. Paragraph 5, please.
Oh, there was one other thing with this. The expression, the day of reckoning, I'm responsible for that because I pointed out it was the day when they had a quarter day, and they said, "What's that?" And I went, "Oh, it's the day they reckon up their accounts." You know, that was it.
Paragraph 5, Mr. Lowe. This deals with an anti-fur demonstration on the 10th of October 1984 at Claridge's. It says Martyn Lowe gave details of the organisers. However, he stated he was uncertain of the exact nature of the event. A little further down, He said, after discussion, the group decided to confine its activities on the day to a peaceful demonstration outside the hotel. If individuals wished to disrupt the event, that would be a matter for them. In this respect, Batchelor, that's Gary Batchelor, said later that he would liaise with Privacy and Privacy, both prominent figures in this field of protest, as to the feasibility of such further action. He added that hotel security would be a major problem. Do you recall being involved in conversations about this demonstration?
I cannot recall that at all. In fact, it's only later on when this document was supplied to me that I learnt that my name had been used that way.
Your evidence is that you can't recall this happening. Can you rule it out?
I can honestly say I was not involved in it.
Do you have any idea why you may have been named as being involved?
Well, it may be this whole thing that they just put all the names of... They added names later without verifying who had actually said something, remembering that it was the sergeants in the squad for the SDS that wrote these things up. I don't remember, anything like that. Certainly was not there.
Thank you. I'm going to move now to ask you about McDonald's. We know from what goes through the 1980s and particularly into the 1990s that London Greenpeace became interested in demonstrating against McDonald's.
Yeah.
Can you recall how that interest began?
Very clearly. I remember after a meeting at one of the group meetings, when we went to the pub, I was in the pub with Gary and with Bob. And Bob brought up the fact that there hadn't been any demonstrations on the fast food companies. And that evening I went away and thought, oh yeah, right. And I thought about that, and I produced a spoof leaflet on McDonald's, which was McDonald's, the Sawdust People. That was and I showed it around, and people, particularly Bob, picked that up and ran with it for organising a demonstration. I just thought it was, for me, a side issue. That was it.
How, if at all, did it relate to the demonstrations against Unigate?
I don't think that, I can't think of any relationship there.
Could we have UCPI 36677? Sir, it's at A14 of the hard copy bundle. This is the spoof leaflet I think you were speaking about. We can see within the burger seems to be a cow. And further down the page, the third sawdust, it says, on the bloody floors of McDonald's slaughterhouses. Is it fair to say that there is an animal rights angle to this leaflet?
I think it's the combination of issues which are in the Sawdust People, and that's the bit that I wrote.
And for example, we have what seem to be ecological concerns in terms of the destruction of the rainforest. We have in the document what seem to be ecological concerns.
Yes.
For example, destruction of the rainforest.
Yes.
So this spoof leaflet is approaching the issue from more than one angle.
Multiple. health issues. And as I say, I just did it as a spoof, not expecting it would take off.
You have just said that you contributed to writing the sawdust element.
I wrote McDonald's the Sawdust People, and the bit that gets sawdust, 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 McDonald's the Sawdust People, that was it.
You didn't do anything that comes above that section.
Nothing else but that.
Being careful with names, can you recall who did contribute to the leaflet above that section that you did?
I cannot recall on this one. Not on this particular leaflet. Not from that time.
When you produced the first draft, which I think is what your evidence was Bob Lambert part of the people you took that first draft to?
He was involved with the group at the time and was turning up at the weekly meetings.
But can you recall whether he was specifically involved in discussions about this leaflet?
I cannot specifically recall. I wouldn't like to go either way on.
Could we please turn to UCPI 14460? It's document B9 in hard copy. Mr. Lowe, this is an intelligence report dated the 23rd of January 1985, reporting on the demonstration against McDonald's on the 19th of January 1985. Pausing here, 19th of January 85, that's what the original spoof leaflet was trailing.
Yeah. The
protest itself, were you involved in planning that event?
I wasn't there, and the thing that I remember very clearly is that it was snowing heavily, which was difficult to get anywhere, and I was with somebody I was involved with at the time, or getting involved with at the time, no names obviously, so that's why it stuck to the date, but I didn't see it as the most important thing to do.
And I think, Mr. Lowe, if we zoom in on paragraph 4, please, we can see that, in fact, you're reported not to have been present. However, it describes you, Dave Morris, and Albert Beale as being much concerned in the preparations for this event. Do you agree with that assessment?
It wasn't. And there's one other thing there. And I was told this afterwards, I knew that they were going to meet on the steps of St Martin's in the Field. The police outside of South Africa House were the ones that noticed it and followed them down to the Strand. So, that is how subsequent events took place.
It is reported here, Mr. Lowe, that there were adverse comments made about you and the planning strategy. Of course, you weren't there, but do you know whether these comments were in fact made about you?
The first I knew about them was reading this report.
I'm not going to turn to it, Mr. Lowe, but you've also provided to the inquiry the same spoof leaflet, which has the date the 13th of April 1985, which I think is a second iteration of the same leaflet trailing the same kind of event. Is that right? You've also provided to the inquiry a second copy of the leaflet.
Oh, yes.
Which advertises an event on the 13th of April 1985.
I had that, but I didn't go on that event.
Please could we turn to UCPI 36676. This is at A13, sir. It's a letter you received, Mr. Lowe, from Bob Lambert.
Yes.
We can see at the top that it's dated Tuesday, the 22nd of April, 1986. I'm going to read it all through,
Okay.
and then ask you some questions at various points. Dear Martyn, listen, why don't you come along to Ensley Street one Thursday, just as a guest? I appreciate you don't want to get involved anymore. Your presence is missed, if not your views. What I mean is, I'd like to buy you a drink in Mabel's. Is that the pub that you would go to after the meetings? Mr. Lowe, is Mabel's the pub that you would go to?
Mabel's is a pub, yeah.
He says more about the pub and a provisional date to meet you. At this time, Mr. Lowe, you had withdrawn from London Greenpeace. What was your relationship with Bob Lambert around April 1986?
Just correspondence. I never saw him after pulling out the group until I was part of the group that outed him a decade ago.
And then we move to the next paragraph. It says, now, what I need to get hold of is Big Mac, the unauthorised story of McDonald's by, I'm afraid I can't read that, but somebody in Steve Chain, New American Library. I thought I'd ask you first, as you're a librarian, but I guess I could order it at Houseman's. Do you recall him asking for this book?
I can only recall what's on this letter.
Do you recall whether you obtained it for him or not?
No, I did not get it for him. Anyone in libraries would say, well, put in a request for it.
The next sentence, Paul has now been committed to Crown Court for an offence under the Indecent Displays Control Act, i.e. giving out that leaflet outside Murray's Meat Market in Brixton. Firstly, I think you want to correct something from your witness statement. You believe, I think, that this is Paul Gravett, but you're not sure.
I have no... all I have is what is written there. I think I made a presumption it must have been, but I have now... I now understand that Paul wasn't there.
Okay.
So withdraw that.
Do you recall the leaflet that he's speaking about when he says that leaflet?
I never saw it.
Do you know what he's talking about at all?
Only from what's in the letter and from the reports that I read since then, since the inquiry started.
What do you think the leaflet is?
I think it was just a general one saying meat is... it goes back to the meat is murder idea. But I never saw the leaflet at all, so I don't know what the wording was.
It seems to imply that this is a leaflet of notoriety.
Yes.
It's a leaflet that people know about, including you, is the implication. Do you have a specific image in your mind of what leaflet you think it is?
Only from what I've read. I don't know. It would have been a general one on, about butchers, as I would understand these things to be. But as I say, I have not seen a copy of it. So the specifics of it, I'm unable to comment upon.
Thank you. And we can take that document down now, thank you. So I'm about to move to a slightly different topic.
Yes.
I wonder if now is a convenient moment for a break.
How much longer do you anticipate being?
Not shorter than an hour.
You're right, in which case the shorthand writers need a break. Yes, we'll break for 15 minutes.
Thank you.
We'll break for 15 minutes now, Mr. Lowe, to let the shorthand writers have a break.
Good.
Mr. Lowe, I'm going to now ask you about the connection, or otherwise, between London Greenpeace and the ALF after Bob Lambert infiltrated the group. Please could we have UCPI 14474 on the screen? Sorry, I don't have a hard copy reference for this one. It's the 30th of January 1985. Please could we have paragraph 3 blown up? It relates, Mr. Lowe, to a meeting on the 24th of January 1985. It says that the main item on the agenda concerned the group's association with the ALF. Martyn Lowe, a member of 14 years, argued that the recent activities of the ALF, i.e., the Mars bars poison hoax, shampoo and turkey poisoning, threats of violence to vivisectors, etc., made it necessary for London Greenpeace, essentially an anarcho-pacifist group, to withdraw its support for the ALF forthwith. Firstly, do you recall saying these things?
I can't remember saying things like the exact words, but that would have been my attitude. I very, very much remember the Mars bar hoax, which I thought was stupid.
The implication of the comments attributed to you are that London Greenpeace should withdraw its support from the ALF. And so the implication is that it did in fact support the ALF. What do you say about the accuracy of that?
Should be seen to be associated with giving tacit support for, but there was nothing official saying we are part of you. But just saying, well, we shouldn't have been seen to be part of that whole process that they were doing. It was the difference between the original ALF doing non-violent stuff and the one which was getting all the violent actions. And that was the animal rights militia. But at that stage, the ALF had actually produced a leaflet or a document saying it was okay to use violence. That is as I understand it.
Were individual members of London Greenpeace supportive of the ALF?
Politically, yes, I think. But as individuals...
Politically, yes. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Sympathetic to?
That's support for or sympathy with. Do you know if anybody who would regularly turn up to London Greenpeace meetings was involved in ALF-style, if I can put it that way, activity?
No, I do not recall anyone being... I cannot give any names because I didn't know anyone who was doing it. I did know Ronnie Lee and I did know Vivian Smith because I was working at Putney and they had an office round the corner, and because of bumping into Ronnie, I'd met them, but that was it. But I wasn't talking to them at all about what the ALF were doing.
At this time, so this is January 1985, was your time at London Greenpeace coming towards an end?
Definitely. I was fed up with what the attitude was. And after all the years I've been involved, I was tired of it. You try going to a meeting once a week for, a decade and a half, you're going to get tired.
You spoke earlier about being dismayed, if I can put it that way, with the lack of a reaction to nuclear issues.
Yes.
You have just mentioned that you became tired with the group. Was there anything going on in the group that you found objectionable, that you found you could not associate yourself with?
It was the attitude, the general attitude, I think, than anything specific.
The attitude to what?
The general attitude of people who were there. This, you must remember, is a time when punk was very much in vogue, and I think some of the people turning up were influenced by it.
In what way?
As a style statement.
Were you concerned about the activities of anybody in the group?
Not specifically. There was this guy, Axel.
We won't mention names, okay, but you can carry on
There
from
was
now.
one individual, right? But for other reasons. But no, I mean, there had been somebody who had turned up at the end of one of the Stop the Cities, whose attitude was pretty antisocial, and that was it. But he disappeared. And I can't remember his name.
Please, could we have paragraph 4 of the report up on screen? We're still dealing with the same intelligence report. The meeting was the 24th of January 1985. And it says this: Lowe's comments were met with derision from an audience which included many ALF supporters. When you made comments of this kind to try and dissociate yourself and the group from the actions you've spoken about, do you recall being met with derision?
I can't remember that, but I remember that people, a few people were being they had a derogatory attitude for what I was trying to do.
If we pick this statement up slightly further down, we have Dave Morris at the far right. And it says, Dave Morris, a supporter of any action which can be described as anti-establishment, stated that ALF should receive the full backing of London Greenpeace, as it had always enjoyed. Do you recall whether or not Dave Morris made that statement or words to that effect?
I cannot recall it. If anything, Dave and myself would argue politics, but it was as part of a process of working out where we were going.
Well, on that point then, if we can move to UCPI 28493, it's an intelligence report of the 21st of January 1986, so it's at B21. This is a report specifically about you, Mr. Lowe, and about you leaving London Greenpeace. Could we have paragraphs 2 and 3 enlarged? Thank you. It says this, Mr. Lowe: after an association lasting 13 years, Martyn Lowe left London Greenpeace in December 1985. His departure followed many arguments with Dave Morris and other group members who were prepared to support violent direct action. Lowe is a confirmed pacifist who cannot even accept the morality of smashing butchers' shop windows, an activity that became increasingly popular amongst London Greenpeace activists during 1985. There's some comments to unpack there. The first is the arguments between yourself and Martyn and Dave Morris. Were they theoretical or practical? What were the issues?
Theoretical and practical. I'll say that Dave and myself have always argued politics, but it's understood. You can argue politics, but you can still like the person. And, I think Dave is one of these people you really like, but you're always going to have an argument with on politics. It's just the way it is.
Secondly, then, this suggestion that Dave Morris and other group members were prepared to support violent direct action. What do you have to say about the accuracy of that statement?
The thing is that there's the rhetoric and there's a reality. And as to smashing butchers' windows, the glass that is actually, knocked out is a danger to other people who are going to cut themselves on. It's not a wise thing to do.
The notion that Dave Morris himself was prepared to support violent direct action, do you agree with that or disagree?
Dave has always been more in favour of doing direct action than, and it depends what you mean by direct action as well, because there's different types of direct action. I mean, we talk about non-violent direct action as one thing, but it's direct action. So Dave has always been direct action orientated, whereas I've always, I still take the view you've got to work in every level of society.
On the subject of violence and unpacking that notion, I'm going to ask for a paragraph of Bob Lambert's statement to be put up on screen so that you have an opportunity to comment on what he says about you.
Right.
It's page 52, please. It's paragraph 67.1. I'm sorry, the reference is 35081. And if we could go directly to page 52 and paragraph 67.1, please. Thank you. Mr. Lowe, I'm going to read it out and then ask you for you to comment on what's implied from this statement. He says he's considered a particular report. He accepts that it's his. He says, I was reporting on Martyn Lowe because of his involvement in London Greenpeace. This report confirms that Lowe had a special branch file going back to 1978. I would have been reporting on him because of this interest. The fact that he had left London Greenpeace was intelligence worthy of reporting. Maybe in the future, if Lowe ceased to be involved in supporting violence, future reporting might not be necessary. But the SDS would not simply stop having an interest and decide that no further reporting was necessary or justified just because a long-standing target linked to London Greenpeace claimed they were giving up their association with violence. This, Mr. Lowe, suggests that at one time you did support violence. What do you say to that suggestion?
The reason for setting up the Federation of Anarcho-Pacifists was because of concern about class war. It was nothing to do with the internal politics of Greenpeace London. And that's what I will emphasise.
What about the suggestion that you at one time supported violence?
No. I've been a pacifist all my life. My first demonstration was 1968 as a pacifist. I worked in pacifist circles ever since.
Just picking up on something you said about class war, and with no names being mentioned, please.
Yeah.
What was your concern about class war at the time?
That they were wanting just to do the politics of confrontation and had no qualms about using violence. And it was giving anarchism a bad name.
Was that something confined to class war, or was it something that other groups you were involved with were tending towards?
It was specifically about class war.
It follows then that you specifically did not have that concern with London Greenpeace.
I didn't, because that was the main problem, that those of us who were involved in setting up the federation, we were concerned about.
Please could we turn to UCPI 36674. It's A11, sir. It's a letter from Bob Lambert to you.
Yeah.
In your witness statement, you give the date the 7th of January 1986 to this letter. How do you date this letter?
How do I?
How do you put a date on this letter?
It would be 80...
How is it that you have come to be able to give us a date?
I can't remember. I've got these letters.
Okay.
The fact it's got the January, it must be 86.
Thank you. The letter reads as follows, and we start on this page. We'll have to turn over the page because it follows 1, then 2 down, and we'll come back to this one. He says, "Dear Martyn, Highgate is very pleasant under 2 inches of snow. Cars have ground to a standstill on the hill. They can't cope. I trust you're well. Thanks very much for your letter and interesting cuttings. Apparently I was lucky," and if we could turn over the page, thank you, "to get it. You addressed it to N16, where it went. Then it had an interesting journey around Haringey, Tottenham, Muswell Hill and Finchley, before arriving in N6 in rather a sorry state." He says, "News, Dave M." And I think your understanding is that that's Dave Morris?
Dave M's Dave Morris.
Is in Amsterdam, following a fine of £100 for shoplifting at Tottenham magistrates.
All I've got is that to go on. I was not told anything else at the time.
If we could go back to page 1.
By that stage, I was primarily involved with war resisters.
Thank you. It says that Dave Morris was caught nicking booze and he, a teetotaler, a moral somewhere. He says, "Bob, me, backwards and forwards to Camberwell Green Magistrates Court for distributing insulting leaflets outside a butcher's shop." What was the nature of your relationship with Bob Lambert at this point?
Just the correspondence. That was it. People move on.
And then finally on this document, page 3, please. He says, "P.S. after Love Bob, shock horror, an individual, who we won't name, came to a London Greenpeace meeting on ALF and didn't say a word all night." Does this give us any insight into the relationship between London Greenpeace and the ALF in January 1986?
It's after my time. Therefore, I cannot comment upon it. Or rather, I'm unable to comment upon it.
Two more questions on the end of your time at London Greenpeace. The first is in relation to Dave Morris. According to the reporting, he seems to have been a dominant figure in London Greenpeace at the time that you left.
Yes,
Is that accurate?
I think so.
What was the nature of his influence in the group at the time you left?
I think he's just got a strong personality and expresses his views very, very much therefore.
Another personality in the group at the time you left, Bob Lambert.
Yes,
What was the nature of his influence in the group at the time you left?
I'm looking at it in terms of what I felt at the time and what I've seen later. At the time, I don't remember him pushing things, but in retrospect, I think he was influencing people, but more by being the nice guy, the very friendly bloke who was just talking to them separately. I just regret that I didn't pick up on this at the time.
I'm going to move to a completely different topic now. It's the final major topic that I'm going to ask you questions about. It's in relation to Bob Lambert's first sexual relationship
Yes.
whilst undercover with a woman who we're calling CTS.
Yes.
You know her real name, don't you?
Yeah.
But we're not going to use it throughout the evidence today. How did you know CTS?
How did I?
How did you know CTS?
It was obvious they were in.
Sorry, how did you know CTS?
Oh, because of because of turning up at the group.
CTS would turn up at London Greenpeace meetings.
Yes. During this summer of, she turned up about 6 weeks after Bob. And that's when they got involved. It wasn't long after.
What was your impression of CTS as a person?
Very pleasant and concerned about changing the world for the better.
What was her personality like?
As I say, very pleasant and a lovely individual, really nice individual. There was no really nasty things about her.
Do you remember how old she was, roughly, when she joined London Greenpeace?
About 19.
What do you remember of her early interactions with Bob Lambert?
I think she may have been on the Unigate demonstration, and I can't swear to that, but it was obvious that they were a couple, or become a couple.
Maybe to assist your recollection, in the intelligence report that Bob Lambert submitted about Unigate, he named her as an attendee.
Yes.
Bob Lambert's deployment began, he says, on the 18th of June, 1984. When do you think his relationship with CTS began?
August, probably. July, end of July, August, I think. But at this stage, without a diary,
when did you form the impression that they were more than just friends?
fairly soon after, I think. It was then they came over for dinner, and they looked like, and what went through my mind, they looked like the devoted couple, who was playing, and the devoted couple bit.
At the time that you invited them over for dinner, did you understand them to be in a romantic relationship?
Yes.
I'm going to ask for some photographs to be handed to you now, but just some instructions on what's going to happen with those photographs.
Okay.
These are photographs that you have provided to the inquiry of Bob Lambert and CTS.
Yes.
In the version that's available to the public, there is a box which says privacy over the face of CTS. I'm going to ask now for a version without any privacy box to be handed to yourself and to the chairman. Please don't hold that photograph up at any point. Just keep it on your desk for you to look at yourself, and I'll ask you some questions about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And is that both of the photographs? Could we have both? Thank you. The first one I want to ask you about, and for anybody who needs the document reference, it's 36671 at A9 of the bundle. Do you recall when they came over for dinner?
September, October. No, I can't give an exact date.
When they came over for dinner, did the nature of their interactions with each other give you an impression of how long they had been together?
No.
Did they appear to you to be in the very first days of a romantic relationship or more settled?
My impression was that they were devoted to each other rather than either of those.
Looking at that first photograph that you have, but that nobody else is looking at, without revealing any features that might identify CTS, and stepping back, can you give us an idea of what impression that photograph gives you of the nature of their relationship?
Close. That is very close to each other, and as I say, he was and devoted.
Could you put that one down on the desk, please? Could you put that photograph down on the desk and pick up the second one? Do you have the second photograph?
Yes.
Could you have a look at that, please? The second photograph behind the first.
Same, yeah.
Are you looking at the same photograph or a different one?
To make it easier, if it's the copy I've got, it shows
it says 20.
Negative with the 20.
All right, thank you.
Right, that makes it easier.
Thank you. Same question.
Yeah.
What does this photograph tell us about the nature of their relationship?
It's a closeness, just the real closeness to each other, she was devoted to him, I think.
Thank you. I'm going to ask if those photographs could be taken back up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Excuse me for interrupting. Were the photographs taken on the same occasion?
On the same occasion, yes. Same place I was living in.
Mr. Lowe, we've looked at the photographs, a snapshot of their time together. Can you remember anything else about how often they would see each other and in what circumstances?
I do not know. I'd see them together at the meeting, but aside from that, just what I was told and what I was told afterwards.
Did there come a time when CTS left London to go to university?
Yes.
When?
That would be about October of 84. And she came back again later at the Christmas, during Christmas period, and I met her on her own then.
When you met her then, what did you learn of her relationship with HN10?
She, I think, was planning to meet him, but there was nothing really said about that at all. When I did talk to her much later on, is after he had been exposed, and she came over to talk to Rob Evans.
Can I just pause you there and stay around Christmas
Yes.
1984? Did you understand CTS and Bob Lambert to still be in a relationship with each other?
I had the impression from the letters that he sent me later on that he was still, he was still interested in her because one of the letters refers to her hair colour.
Please could we have UCPI 36675? Sir, it's at A12 of the hard copy bundle. I think this is the letter you were referring to, Mr. Lowe.
Yes.
It's a letter dated the 11th of September 1986, and it's from Bob Lambert to you.
Yeah.
The two sections that are of interest to us are on the far right-hand side. We'll begin with a slight tangent. The top right-hand side, it says about cuttings from the previous page in your local paper this year about the Dirkle. Cheers. Was this a request from Bob Lambert to you for any cuttings in relation to the Richmond Dirkle?
It was anything, but I was taking the local newspaper at the time and I never saw anything.
And then back to what we were discussing previously. He says, take care. Let me know instantly if ever you hear or see a certain woman with privacy hair and a singular smile. Now, without revealing what's behind the privacy box, who did you understand this to be?
I understood it to be her.
Back to December 1984, when you met CTS, presumably on her return from university
Yes.
for the Christmas holidays. Did you understand her and Bob Lambert to still be together, or had they broken up?
The way I understood it at the time was they were still a couple.
I'm not going to turn it up unless we need it. In your witness statement, you say that you understood CTS to have been ditched by Bob Lambert
Yes.
by this point. You say that that was your understanding from a conversation with her at Christmas 1984. Refreshing your memory from your statement, is that accurate, or did you understand them to still be together?
I got that really from much later on, when I established contact with her again, and that was, what was it, 2011?
Do you recall whether over the course of 1985, the year that followed, in your relationship with Bob Lambert, whether the two of them were still together or not?
No, nothing mentioned at all.
Please could we have paragraph 116 of Mr. Lowe's witness statement on the screen? It's UCPI 36683. I'm just going to show you the witness statement that you sent into the inquiry so that you can refresh your memory with the full context, and then I'm going to ask you your recollection now. So we'll just wait until it comes up on the screen. Paragraph 116, please. Mr. Lowe, if you just take a moment and read that to yourself and let me know when you've finished.
Okay.
So the question is, when did you find out that the two of them were no longer a couple?
You know, I cannot be exact on that in any way at all. I did have correspondence with her, but I can't recall what she put in those letters about her and Bob.
Please could we go to Bob Lambert's witness statement? It's 35081 UCPI. And page 177, paragraph 297. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Mr. Lowe, this is a paragraph of Bob Lambert's witness statement in which he speaks about his sexual relationship with CTS. He names her as CTS. He says how he came to realise what her name was. He says at the bottom, we formed a friendship after a London Greenpeace meeting at the regular post meeting. Turn over the page. And just paragraph 297, please. Thank you. We formed a friendship after a London Greenpeace meeting gathering at a nearby pub. The friendship started sometime in July 84 and lasted to September 84. Pausing there, is that roughly the same as your recollection?
My recollection is more like October. And that would logically fit into the academic year.
He goes on to say this. This involved attending several Greenpeace meetings and events and regular social gatherings of London Greenpeace members at a pub after the meetings. In addition, it involved attending a social gathering at your home. On one occasion, I gave her a lift home and was invited in, and this was the start of a short sexual relationship. I think this lasted for approximately a month. He gives details of their relationship, saying CTS stayed overnight at my cover address on 2 or 3 occasions, and the sexual relationship continued there. The relationship came to an end when CTS left London. At some point late September, CTS left London to live in privacy, where she was undertaking an academic course. She made one visit to London, probably early October. This was the last time I saw her. I cannot remember whether we had sexual relations during this visit. We can take that down now. Thank you. Bob Lambert says the relationship ended when she went to university. In your witness statement, you say that you came to understand that he had, and I quote, ditched her. What is your understanding that he ditched her based on?
Trying to word this so that I'm not going to trip myself up. I had the impression that if he ditched her, it would have been the end of the year when she came over, because I understood that she was going to attempt to go and see him over that Christmas period. So, you know, I assumed, maybe wrongly, that the relationship was continuing at that point.
Do you know or not who initiated the end of the relationship?
No.
What are your reflections now on the relationship between Bob Lambert and CTS?
As I say, they just looked a devoted couple. And that is the strongest impression I had. And I had the impression that as a couple, they were going to last a long time.
Knowing now that Bob Robinson was in fact undercover officer Bob Lambert,
Yeah.
what are your reflections on the relationship?
On the?
Relationship between the two of them?
I was attempting to use some backslang, which is dratsab, an absolute dratsab. He really badly treated her.
You have said that CTS was approximately aged 19
Yes.
in the summer of 1984. What was your impression at the time of the age difference between Bob Lambert and CTS?
She seemed mature for her age. And, you know, well sussed, as the expression goes. And it didn't seem, when they were talking, to make much difference. But I cannot say what other conversations were going on, to verify anything else.
How do you feel about the fact that you hosted your friend CTS and undercover officer Bob Lambert at your house for dinner?
In retrospect, the humour in me and he took my beer. The reality, though, is that I was just really sad for what he'd done to her. Yeah, really upset that anyone could behave that way.
What has been the impact of the relationship on your relationship with CTS?
She didn't want to know about anyone in the group once that had finished, and therefore I stopped getting correspondence, but I was busy anyway. I didn't notice. When I tried to contact her again after he'd been exposed, I didn't know how to do it. I tried via her parents, I tried via her university, got nowhere. It was only after the tombstone of the real Bob Robinson appeared in The Guardian that she contacted Rob Evans, and via the network she contacted me, and I was able to see her again. And that was nice,
The fact that she didn't want anything to do with London Greenpeace or those associated with Bob Lambert after the relationship had ended, does that suggest that the ending of the relationship had a significant impact on her?
She got badly hurt. That's the only way I can describe it. That's both from what she's told me and what I worked out for myself. She got badly hurt.
Finally, Mr. Lowe, how do you feel about London Greenpeace having been reported on by SDS undercover officers?
Part of me doesn't understand why they would want to do it, given politics, but I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed that we've had to go through this whole process because of one individual.
Ms. Lowe, thank you. Those are the questions I have. There'll be a break now,
Okay.
and we'll come back and finish proceedings.
Thank you.
Another 15-minute break. If there are some more questions, I don't think there'll be too many, and your exercise will then be over. Mr. Wood, I understand there are no questions from anyone other than re-examination by
Yes,
you.
it's just some very short matters.
Yes.
I'm going to ask that Mr. Lowe's witness statement is brought up, please. That's UCPI 36683, please. And I'm going to ask you to look at paragraph 122 initially, if you can. This just deals with the question of age difference
Oh, yes.
in the relationship. And if you could just please look at, and if we could have paragraph 122 up. You were asked about the age difference.
Yes.
You didn't seem to be able to say. I just want you to look, please, at that paragraph and tell us whether that reflects the position.
I think that is correct.
There you indicated the age difference was something between 10 and 12 years old.
Yes.
12 years. Okay, can we please move on, please, to paragraph 126, please, a slightly different topic. This is about McDonald's and your leaflet that you were asked about.
Yes.
And you were then asked whether anyone else produced any other document. And I just want to ask you about that paragraph there. And in particular, the last sentence of that paragraph.
Yes.
And can you please help us as to whether he did prepare any other document?
As I was told, as I understand it, he did. But at this stage, I cannot give chapter and verse. It would have gone to the meeting, but I just cannot give details now. And even since writing, doing this,
Okay.
it's age,
Okay, well then my final area that I want to ask you about is about Ronnie Lee.
Oh, right, yeah.
You talked about being associated and knowing Ronnie Lee, and there was some material that indicated that Ronnie Lee was a friend. How long and when was Ronnie Lee involved in London Greenpeace?
1974.
And for about how long was he involved?
Half a year, but I knew him beforehand via some peace movement organisation.
So in 1974, for about half a year, he's involved in London Greenpeace.
Less than that.
Less than that, okay. But a long time before the deployment of undercover officers and so forth.
Way before.
Okay. Yes, so that's all I have to ask. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Lowe, thank you very much for coming and telling us all about your experiences of 40 years ago. Your difficulty in remembering precise details is wholeheartedly understood by someone who is slightly older than you.
Are you?
Yes.
I just had my 75th birthday. I'm not asking your age.
In that event, I won't confess it. We will resume tomorrow at 10, when, first of all, I must hear some submissions from Mr. Wood, and then we will resume the evidence, and then in the afternoon I will hear further submissions when the evidence of Dave Morris, which will be given tomorrow, is concluded. Thank you.